Mesa loved the smell of fresh bread. It was warm, comforting, and it always made her feel safe. Every morning, she would wake up before the sun, tie her apron, and open the bakery. Her hands would be covered in flour, and she would carefully prepare each loaf, each pastry, imagining one day the bakery would belong to her. Her parents often told her, "Mesa, one day this bakery will be yours." She had believed them for years, pouring her heart into every recipe, every early morning, every tired evening. That night, everything changed. Her brother Baiko came back from the city wearing shiny new shoes and a confident smile. He talked about big plans and smooth deals, and Mesa tried to smile, thinking her parents would see all she had done. She went about her work, cleaning the counters, arranging the trays, feeling the same rhythm she had for years. Then from the back room she heard whispers. She froze, her hands still on the counter, heart racing. Her parents' voices were low but sharp. "We'll sign it over to Baiko tomorrow. He's the face of the business now," her father said. Mesa couldn't move. She felt her chest tighten, like the air had been pulled out of the room. Years of early mornings, of kneading dough until her palms ached, of learning every trick and secret of the bakery. All of it was being given to someone who had never baked a single loaf. She watched them laughing softly, planning a future she wasn't part of. Her hands shook. The warmth of the bakery, the smell of bread that once felt like home, suddenly felt cold and foreign. For a moment, Mesa just stood there, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what she had heard. The dream she had held so tightly for so long seemed to vanish in the silence of that night. She looked around the bakery, the counter she had polished, the ovens she had learned to master, the shelves she had stocked with care, and realized it didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to Baiko. Her heart ached with betrayal. And for the first time, she understood that love and hard work sometimes weren't enough to protect what was hers. She lowered her hands slowly, feeling the cold sweep through her chest, knowing that tomorrow nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Mesa walked into the bakery, expecting the usual smell of warm bread and the soft morning light. Instead, there was a strange tension in the air. Her parents had gathered everyone around the counter. Her father's face was proud, his voice firm and certain, and her mother stood beside him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mesa's heart beat faster as she sensed something was wrong. Her father cleared his throat and said, "Baiko will officially manage the bakery from now on. Mesa will assist as usual." The word assist hit Mesa harder than she could have imagined. It felt like fire on her skin. Every early morning, every late night, every loaf she had baked with love, every idea she had shared to make the bakery better, it all meant nothing. The place she had called her own, the place she had dreamed of running, was now being handed to Baiko, a brother who had never touched flour, never kneaded dough, never stayed up past midnight waiting for bread to rise. Baiko walked over, hugging their parents tightly, his smile wide and smug. He turned to Mesa and whispered as if trying to be kind, "Don't take it personal. You're good with your hands. I'm good with people." Mesa looked at him, her chest tight, her eyes burning, but no words came out. For the first time, she didn't smile back. She didn't try to argue or explain herself. She just felt the weight of all the years, all the work, all the love she had put into this bakery slipping away. Her hands, still smelling faintly of yeast and sugar, trembled as she slowly untied her apron. She placed it carefully on the counter, as if laying down not just cloth, but a part of herself. The bakery was quiet for a moment. The ovens hummed, the morning light fell softly across the counters, and the bread sat in neat rows, unaware of the heartbreak that now filled the room. Mesa's parents didn't notice her silent protest. They were too busy celebrating Baiko. He didn't notice her pain either, too confident in his new role. Mesa took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and shock. For the first time, she realized this was bigger than just a bakery. It was about respect, recognition, and the dreams that had been ignored for years. She left the counter without another word, feeling the stirrings of a decision she had not yet fully understood. The bakery she loved was still there, but it no longer belonged to her. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet fire began to grow. A fire that would not be snuffed out by anyone, not even her family. Mesa stepped out of the bakery without saying a single word. Her shoes sank into the wet dust of the street, leaving faint marks behind as if the earth itself remembered her pain. The morning air was cool, carrying the faint smell of rain and bread from nearby stalls. But it did nothing to calm the storm inside her. Her father's voice called after her, sharp and demanding, but she didn't look back. For the first time, she ignored the voice that had guided and controlled her for years. Every step felt heavy, yet strangely freeing. She thought of all the mornings she had woken before the sun, kneading dough with aching hands, staying up late to perfect recipes, sacrificing sleep, friends, and even her own dreams to make the bakery a home. And now it was handed to someone who hadn't lifted a single tray, who hadn't felt the burn of flour on his palms. The betrayal cut deeper than she could ever describe, yet with it came clarity. For years, she had lived for their approval, bending herself to fit the image they wanted. Today something inside her broke, and hardened at the same time. By the time Mesa reached the corner, the bakery's windows behind her reflected her small, determined figure. She felt a strange mix of emptiness and strength. She had nothing in her hands. No shop, no title, no inheritance of family favor. All she carried were her recipes, her burned and calloused palms, the lessons she had learned in flour and fire, and her dignity. Those things, she realized, were stronger than any signed paper or inherited shop. She paused for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling the dust under her shoes and the sunlight breaking through the clouds. The pain of betrayal was sharp, but so was the spark of possibility. Mesa understood, in a quiet, unshakable way, that starting over didn't mean losing herself. Sometimes, all you needed to begin again were your skills, your courage, and your heart. She tightened her grip on the small bundle of papers with her new recipes, squared her shoulders, and continued walking. Each step felt like a small declaration. She would rise, she would create, and she would show the world what they had failed to see. The street stretched ahead, uncertain and wide, but for Mesa, it was no longer empty. It was the first step toward her own future, a future built on her own hands, her own fire, and her own story. Mesa squeezed into a tiny, dim backroom at the end of an old tailor's shop. The walls were cracked, the paint peeling, and there was no oven, no counter, nothing that even resembled a proper kitchen. There was only one small wooden table, a broken kettle, and a single cracked chair. The room felt cold and empty, and for a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake by leaving everything behind. But as she set down her few belongings and her notebook filled with scribbled recipes, she remembered the fire in her heart. Every night, she whispered to herself, "One day, I'll bake again." The words felt fragile, but they were all she had. Mesa couldn't afford ingredients like before, and she had no proper tools, but she refused to let that stop her. She spent hours drawing and sketching, imagining new recipes, writing down ideas she had never tried. There were coconut cinnamon loaf, sweet and fragrant, mango honey bun, soft and sticky with golden sweetness, and street spice bread, a recipe that carried the warmth and smell of her childhood streets. Each page of her notebook was a promise to herself, a dream she refused to give up. The old landlord, Tamba, noticed her sitting for hours at that table, her pen moving, her eyes bright despite the dim light. One afternoon, he leaned on the doorway and said gently, "Child, your eyes still glow when you talk about bread. Don't let betrayal make them dull." His voice was kind, steady, and it sank into her chest like warm honey. Those words made her heart beat faster, stronger. They reminded her that the fire inside her was bigger than anyone else's opinion, bigger than her family's betrayal, and bigger than the small, dark room she was in. Mesa began to see the space differently. The broken kettle became a tool for small experiments. The table became her stage, and the room, though dim, became a place where her ideas could grow. She worked in silence, imagining customers tasting her new bread, imagining the smiles on their faces, imagining herself standing proud and free again. Every night, she whispered again, "One day I'll bake again." And this time she felt a spark of certainty. That little room with no light became her fire pit, the place where dreams started quietly, one page at a time, one recipe at a time. Mesa learned that sometimes, even in the darkest, smallest corners, hope can grow, and a new beginning can be born from what others see as nothing. She realized betrayal could not take her passion, and as long as her heart was alive, so was her dream. One hot afternoon, a group of schoolchildren walked past Mesa's tiny backroom, their stomachs growling and voices low with hunger. Mesa watched them pause, looking longingly at the little table she had set outside the shop. Without thinking, she grabbed a loaf she had baked on her small charcoal stove, tore it into slices, and handed them out for free. Their eyes lit up, and their smiles were so wide it made her heart ache and swell at the same time. That simple act of sharing made the room feel warmer than it ever had, even without an oven or proper counter. The next day, the same children returned, this time with friends from their neighborhood. Mesa had barely enough bread, but she welcomed them all. The laughter, the chatter, and the excitement of tasting her bread filled the dusty little street. Word began to spread quickly through the neighborhood about the girl giving out bread with a smile, and soon people were coming from nearby corners just to see what the buzz was about. They called her little table sunrise bread, because to them, it felt like a bright start to their day, a warm moment in their ordinary lives. Mesa's charcoal stove, once tiny and unassuming, began to feel like magic. People kept returning, not just for the taste of the bread, but for the warmth and care baked into it. Soon, a kind baker from a nearby shop lent her a small oven to make more bread. Mesa's table, once just a place for a few slices, turned into a small line of waiting customers. Each day brought more smiles, more orders, more stories. For the first time since leaving the bakery, Mesa felt seen, truly seen, not as someone's assistant or a child who needed their approval, but as Mesa, a baker, a creator, someone who could make people happy with her own hands. She realized that what she had built, even in a small backroom with no light, had value. Her heart swelled with pride, hope, and determination. The fire her landlord had seen in her eyes months ago had finally caught. Sunrise bread became more than just a name. It became a symbol of Mesa's resilience, her talent, and her courage to start again. Every loaf she handed out told a story of betrayal, strength, and rebirth. For the first time in a long time, Mesa felt alive, powerful, and free. And she knew this was only the beginning of something bigger than she had ever imagined. Weeks passed, and Mesa's little stall outside the tailor's shop was no longer just a small table with a borrowed oven. People came from every corner of the neighborhood, drawn by the smell of her fresh bread and the warmth in every bite. Her sunrise bread had become a name people trusted. Meanwhile, Biko's bakery, once crowded with regulars, began to empty. Customers who had never cared for the difference between breads now realized that Mesa's loaves were softer, more flavorful, and made with something his bakery had never learned: heart. One morning, Biko stormed into Mesa's corner, his expensive shoes kicking up dust as he reached her table. His face was red with anger, his fists clenched. "You're stealing my customers," he snapped, his voice echoing down the street. People turned to watch, curious and silent. Mesa looked up from kneading a small batch of dough, her hands steady, her face calm. She met his glare with quiet certainty and said simply, "You can't steal what you never earned." Her words hit him harder than any shouting or argument could. The calm in her voice, the confidence in her eyes, rattled him more than any insult or threat. Biko had always relied on his family name and charm to carry him through life. He had never known what it meant to build something with his own hands, to sweat over dough in the early mornings, to care about each customer. Mesa had, and now everyone could see it. From that day on, Biko made it his mission to destroy her. He dropped prices drastically at his bakery, hoping to lure her customers back. He whispered lies about her bread, telling people she was stealing recipes or using cheap ingredients. He even tried bribing suppliers so that Mesa could not get flour or sugar. Every attempt to break her was calculated, cruel, and relentless. But Mesa did not flinch. Every time Biko tried to push her down, she rose a little higher. Each loaf she baked, each customer who smiled and came back, reminded her that she was not competing for recognition. She was competing for herself. Her quiet strength, her patience, and her focus on her craft became a shield no lies, no bribes, and no intimidation could break. Biko could try to destroy her business, but he could not destroy her spirit. And the more he raged, the more people saw the difference. The real baker was the one who poured her heart into every slice, while he only relied on a name. Slowly, the street began to whisper not about Biko's bakery, but about Mesa, the girl who refused to be defeated. One quiet night, Mesa walked back to her little stall, humming softly to herself, thinking about the next batch of bread she would bake. But when she reached the spot, her heart froze. Smoke curled into the night sky, and the faint smell of burning filled the air. Her stall, her oven, her table, and all the bread she had prepared, Everything was gone. Only ashes remained where her dreams had once sat. The neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering behind her back, "Baiko did this." It was him. Mesa didn't scream or cry. She simply sat on the curb, letting the cold night wind brush her face. She watched the smoke rise and fade into the dark sky. Her heart ached, but in that ache something hardened. Years of sweat, patience, and passion were gone in a single fire, but Mesa realized that fire could not take the most important thing: her courage, her skill, and her vision. She sat until dawn, the first light casting soft gold over the blackened ashes. The street was silent, except for the quiet sound of her breathing. When Tamba, her old landlord, came around in the early morning, he found her there, covered in ash and dirt but sitting straight and still. He knelt beside her and said gently, "You can rebuild bread. But can he rebuild respect?" His words sank into her heart like a spark catching fire. Respect, she realized, could not be burned. That was something she carried inside her, something no one could take, no matter how cruel or jealous. With the first sun of the day, Mesa rose and walked to the marketplace. She had almost nothing left, a few coins, a little courage, and her dreams, but that was enough. She bought used baking tools, some old pans, and a small charcoal stove. She carried them back to her tiny corner of the street, her hands shaking but her heart steady. Piece by piece, she began to rebuild. She swept the ashes, set up her table, and started kneading dough with trembling fingers, feeling the familiar warmth of bread rising beneath her palms. If her fire had been stolen, she would build another one, stronger, brighter, with her own hands. Every loaf she baked was no longer just bread. It was proof that she could rise again, that betrayal and destruction could not defeat her spirit. Mesa understood something crucial. A fire could destroy a stall, but it could never destroy the courage to start over, and it could never destroy the woman who refused to give up. Months passed, and Mesa's tiny backroom and burned stall were nothing but memories now. She had saved, scrimped, and worked tirelessly, and finally, she opened a small shop on the edge of the highway. She named it Mesa's Rise, a promise to herself and a declaration to anyone who had doubted her. The shop was modest but clean, with shelves lined with golden loaves and fragrant pastries, the smell of bread greeting every visitor like an old friend. Travelers passing through the highway stopped to taste her bread. Traders placed small orders for their shops, and even city restaurants began asking for her special loaves. Word spread quickly. People talked about the girl who had walked away from her family's bakery, who had started over with nothing, and had built something extraordinary. One busy morning, a journalist arrived, drawn by the long line of customers waiting patiently. Outside, he watched as Mesa served bread with a calm smile, her hands moving with the ease and confidence of someone who had earned every moment. He asked her story and she told it simply: betrayal, ashes, small tools, hard work, and hope. That story, titled "The Girl Who Built a Bakery from Ashes," went viral across the town, shared on social media, in newspapers, and even on television. People loved it. They were inspired by her courage, her skill, and her refusal to be defeated. Orders poured in like never before. Mesa worked from early morning until late at night, kneading dough, baking, and filling bags for delivery. Each loaf she baked carried not just flavor, but the story of her resilience. She smiled quietly as she thought about how far she had come. Her parents saw the article and could not believe their eyes. The bakery they had given to Baiko was failing, while their daughter, the one they had ignored, had built a name that everyone knew. They sat at home, reading about her, feeling pride mixed with regret. But it was too late. That evening, the bell above her shop door jingled, and Baiko walked in. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a look of shame. He scanned the room, the crowd of loyal customers, and the shelves filled with bread he could never match. Finally he approached Mesa, voice low, hesitant. "Mesa, I didn't know you had this in you," he said. Mesa looked at him, calm and steady, her eyes reflecting both the past pain and present strength. She replied softly, "You never looked close enough to see." Her words hung in the air like a quiet victory. In that moment, she understood something she had always known. She didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. She had risen from ashes, built her own path, and nothing, not betrayal, not fire, not arrogance, could take that away from her. Weeks after her shop became the talk of the town, Mesa's parents appeared at the door of Mesa's Rise. Their faces were drawn, their eyes full of worry and regret. They stepped inside carefully, as if walking into a place they had no right to be. The shop was bustling with customers, the air warm with the smell of fresh bread, and for a moment, Mesa simply watched them, quiet and composed. She remembered the years they had dismissed her, the mornings she had worked before anyone noticed, and the nights she had cried silently over stolen dreams. Yet now they had come hoping for something, forgiveness, perhaps, or a second chance. Her mother's eyes welled up with tears as she spoke, her voice trembling. "We were wrong, Mesa. We thought success meant a name on a paper. We forgot who gave it meaning." The words hit the air like fragile glass, heavy with truth and regret. Mesa could see her father nodding silently, unable to meet her gaze, guilt written on every line of his face. Mesa smiled politely, a calm, quiet strength in her expression. She reached for a loaf of bread, still warm from the oven, and offered it to them. "You don't owe me apologies," she said gently. "You taught me something better, that family doesn't always see your worth until the world does." Her voice was soft but carried the weight of years spent proving herself, building from nothing, and refusing to be broken. Her parents accepted the bread quietly, their hands shaking slightly as they held it. They looked around at the busy shop, at the long line of customers waiting patiently, at the success that Mesa had created entirely on her own. For the first time, they truly saw her, not as a child who needed guidance, but as a woman who had built her life with courage, skill, and determination. They left quietly that day, stepping back into the street where they had once dismissed her efforts. They understood at last that they had lost more than just a daughter's loyalty. They had lost her trust, something far deeper and harder to regain. Mesa watched them go, feeling neither anger nor sadness, only a quiet satisfaction. She had proven herself, not for them, but for her own heart. Her parents' regret could not undo her years of dedication, her rise from ashes, or the respect she had earned from everyone around her. Mesa turned back to her shop, to the warm ovens and the happy chatter of her customers, and realized that this was her true family now. The people who had believed in her, who had come to love her bread, and who saw her worth long before her parents finally understood it. She smiled, dusted her hands with flour, and continued her work, stronger and freer than ever before. A year later, Mesa stood on a small stage at a crowded food festival, her hands still dusted with flour from the morning's baking. The sun shone brightly, warming the rows of golden loaves displayed neatly on the tables before her. Hundreds of people had gathered, eager to hear the story of the girl who had built a bakery from nothing. Mesa took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every early morning, every burned hand, every moment of doubt that had brought her to this exact place. She raised her voice so everyone could hear, calm yet strong. "They gave my brother the bakery, but I took the courage it took to build it, and bake something new." Her words were simple, but they carried the power of every sacrifice she had made. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause, rising to their feet. Cameras flashed, capturing her image, her determination, and the golden bread that lined the tables, each loaf a symbol of her journey. Mesa looked down at the bread she had baked with her own hands, each piece soft, warm, and full of care. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, "This is not revenge. This is rebirth." The words settled in the air, carrying the meaning of everything she had endured. Every insult, every betrayal, every night spent in a tiny dark room had led to this moment. She realized that she had not only built a bakery, she had built herself, her courage, and her life on her own terms. For the first time in her life, the smell of bread did not bring the sting of pain or the shadow of disappointment. It brought peace, pride, and a quiet joy that filled her chest. People were smiling, tasting her creations, sharing their happiness, and she finally understood that her journey had touched them too. Mesa's story was no longer just about a bakery or family betrayal. It was about resilience, courage, and the beauty of starting over. She stepped back from the table, watching the crowd interact with her bread, the laughter, the gratitude, and the admiration surrounding her. Mesa realized that she had turned something meant to break her into something that inspired hundreds of people. The journey from ashes to golden loaves had shaped her, and now every loaf she baked told a story of strength, rebirth, and hope. She smiled softly, feeling a lightness she had never known, knowing that the life she had fought for, the dream she had rebuilt, was finally hers. Not borrowed, not handed to her, but earned with every ounce of her heart and soul.